26 days of absolute, deafening silence, and then like clockwork the machine starts humming. Isn't it funny how grief in the digital age looks exactly like a high-stakes board meeting? We aren't talking about private tears or quiet reflection here. No, we are talking about the kind of calculated, cold-blooded narrative shifting that costs more than your annual salary. On May 5th, while a family was dressed in white, burying a piece of their soul in a New Jersey church, a certain someone finally found his password. But he didn't use it to give answers. He used it to launch a brand. And just 48 hours later, right on cue, TMZ drops an article that reads less like news and more like a desperate plea for a PR award. Does anyone actually believe in coincidences anymore? Because the timing of this story is so precise it feels like it was handled by a NASA engineer. We're going to talk about that letter. We're going to talk about the 6 times the phrase "sources close to Joe" appeared in a single article. And most importantly, we're going to talk about why a crypto tycoon is more afraid of your questions than he is of the truth. Stay with me because the performance is over and the curtains are coming down right now. The performance began on May 5, 2026. And if you were paying attention, you could smell the desperation through the screen. While the pews of the Second Baptist Church were filled with people mourning a woman whose life was cut short in a Zanzibar villa, Joe McCann was busy drafting a masterpiece of emotional manipulation. You have to admire the audacity, don't you? To wait 26 days while a father drives across state lines for answers, while a mother begs for the return of an engagement ring that seems to have vanished into the Tanzanian air, and then to choose the very hour of her funeral to post a public statement. That isn't grief. That is a strategic strike. He called her his best friend and his confidant. He talked about her wanting to be a mother. He painted a picture of domestic bliss that felt like a scripted Hallmark movie, but he forgot to include the footnotes. He forgot to mention why he waited 11 hours to call her family while she lay dying or dead. He forgot to explain why he told them she was stable when she was anything but. He forgot to address the hospital reports that whispered the words strangulation and suffocation. It was a statement of grief that functioned as a vacuum, sucking up all the oxygen in the room, so that no one could ask about the unidentified marks on her neck. But the world wasn't just reading his words. They were watching the clock. They were counting the days. And they were noticing that for a man who claimed to be so devastated, he was remarkably silent about the facts. This is the man who built a career on being the smartest guy in the room, the crypto visionary who could predict market swings before they happened, yet suddenly when it comes to the final hours of his fiancée's life, his memory seems to have hit a technical glitch. Savannah Britt, a woman who eats PR strategies for breakfast, saw right through it. She called it word salad. And she wasn't just being mean, she was being accurate. It was a professional construction of language designed to make you feel something so that you would stop thinking something. It was meant to bridge the gap between his silence and the upcoming media blitz. Because 2 days later, the real show started. TMZ didn't just stumble onto a story. They were handed a narrative. When an article appears 48 hours after a funeral with the headline focusing on the racist taunts the fiancé is receiving, you aren't reading news. You are reading a pivot. You are watching a man who was the primary person of interest in a global conversation try to transform himself into a victim. The article used the phrase "sources close to Joe" 6 separate times. Think about that. 6 times in one story. That isn't a journalist finding a witness in a dark alley. That is a publicist on a conference call. It's a very specific type of magic trick. You take the very real, very valid questions of a grieving community, and you label them as harassment. You take the legitimate concerns about a missing ring and a suspicious autopsy, and you bury them under a headline about hate speech. It is a brilliant, if disgusting, use of a very serious social issue to provide cover for a man whose passport is currently sitting in a Tanzanian evidence locker. TMZ knows the game. They know that by citing anonymous sources, they can print whatever Joe wants the world to hear without anyone having to take an oath. They told us Joe is heartbroken. They told us Joe would never hurt a woman. They told us Joe is cooperating. But they didn't tell us where Joe is. They didn't tell us why the hotel staff saw a fight that the PR team wants to call a minor disagreement. They didn't tell us why the surveillance footage that the family is screaming for hasn't been released to the public. Instead, they gave us a story designed to fracture the community. It's step 1 of the reputation management playbook: divide and conquer. If you can make the people asking questions feel like they are part of a toxic mob, they might stop asking. If you can make the investors at Andreessen Horowitz or the venture capital firms in Silicon Valley think that Joe is just a victim of a tragic misunderstanding and a mean internet, maybe they won't pull their money. Because let's be honest, this has never been about Joe's heart. This has always been about Joe's hedge fund. The brand of the visionary founder is a fragile thing. And it doesn't survive words like strangulation unless those words are drowned out by a louder, more sympathetic noise. Savannah Britt warned us. She told the world that the machine was moving. She pointed out that the hotel staff didn't just hear a loud noise. They saw the physical reality of a conflict that the police reports later described as a frequent occurrence across multiple days. Not one bad night. Not a single argument. A pattern of behavior that led to them being separated by hotel management. Think about the logistics of that. You are at a luxury resort, the kind of place people go to forget the world exists, and you are making enough noise, creating enough of a scene, that the staff has to physically move one of you to a villa 10 minutes away. That isn't a lover's spat. That is a crisis. And yet, Joe's letter talked about quiet moments of reflection, and the joys of being in love. The disconnect between the reality on the ground in Zanzibar and the prose on Joe's Instagram is wide enough to fly a private jet through. But the PR campaign doesn't care about the disconnect. It only cares about the frequency. If they say he's a victim enough times, if they mention the racist threats enough times, the average person who only sees the headline will start to wonder if maybe they were too quick to judge. They want you to feel guilty for your curiosity. They want you to feel ashamed for demanding to know why a 31-year-old woman who was feeding giraffes and celebrating her birthday on April 3rd was dead by April 9th. They want to turn the focus away from the Zuri Zanzibar resort and back to the comment sections of Twitter and Instagram. They are trying to make the audience the villain of the story so that Joe can play the hero who is suffering in silence. But the silence wasn't silent. It was a tactical pause. It was the 26 days it took to hire the right firm, to coordinate with the right outlets, and to ensure that the narrative landed at the exact moment of maximum emotional exhaustion. They waited for the funeral because they knew that once the body was in the ground, the public's attention span would naturally start to wane. They wanted to catch the tail end of the grief cycle and ride it back to professional respectability. But they underestimated one thing. They underestimated the fact that digital footprints don't wash away in the Tanzanian surf. They underestimated the fact that a community that has been galvanized by a tragedy doesn't just go home because a publicist told them to. Every move Joe has made since April 9th has been documented. Every delay, every excuse, every strategically placed leak is being added to a file that won't be closed by a TMZ article. The missing ring isn't just a piece of jewelry. It's a symbol of everything that hasn't been returned to the Robinson family. They didn't get their daughter back whole. They didn't get the truth back. They didn't even get a phone call from the man who was supposed to be her husband until 11 hours had passed, and the hotel had already done the heavy lifting of breaking the news. When you look at the timeline, the PR campaign looks less like an expression of love and more like an admission of guilt. Why do you need a six-figure reputation management team if you have nothing to hide? Why do you need to cite anonymous sources to tell the world you're a good person if your actions speak for themselves? The reason is simple. The actions don't speak. They scream. And the scream is becoming too loud for even the most expensive publicist to ignore. We are watching a high-stakes game of narrative chicken, where Joe McCann is betting that his wealth and his connections can outrun the facts of what happened in that room. He is betting that the world will forget about the marks on the neck and the 78% drop in his fund's value if he just plays the victim long enough. But as the investigation deepens and the independent autopsy results loom over this story like a dark cloud, the PR script is starting to look very thin. The words are losing their power because they aren't backed by evidence. They are backed by sources close to Joe. And the world is finally starting to realize that those sources are just echoes in an empty room. The echoes in that empty room are getting louder, and the walls of the asymmetric empire are starting to look a little shaky. You see, the transition from part 1 to part 2 of this saga isn't just a change in tone. It's a change in the stakes. We've moved past the initial shock and the flowery Instagram posts, and now we're entering the cold, hard reality of the professional fallout. Because while the public is looking at the tragedy of a life lost, the people in Joe McCann's professional circle are looking at the spreadsheets. They are looking at the 2025 collapse of the Liquid Alpha Fund, where hundreds of millions of dollars of institutional money basically evaporated under his watch. When you're managing that kind of capital, your reputation isn't just a luxury, it is your literal currency. If the visionary founder brand is replaced by the man whose passport is confiscated in Tanzania, the money doesn't just stop flowing, it starts sprinting in the opposite direction. This is why the TMZ article wasn't for you, and it certainly wasn't for Ashlee's family. It was for the guys in the Patagonia vests. It was for the venture capitalists who need a reason, any reason, to keep their names associated with his. The narrative shift from grieving fiancé to victim of a racist mob is a very specific, very calculated corporate defense mechanism. If you can frame the scrutiny as bias, you can ignore the strangulation report. If you can frame the questions as harassment, you can ignore the fact that the engagement ring is still missing. It's the ultimate gaslighting of an entire community. Savannah Britt pointed out that Joe's investors are the only audience that matters to him right now. Think about the timing again. The fund was already in trouble. The professional world was already whispering about his failed ventures and the massive losses. Then this happened. In the world of high finance, a scandal involving a suspicious death is the final nail in the coffin. Unless, of course, you can manufacture a scenario where you are the one being wronged. The PR machine began working overtime to ensure that when an investor Googles Joe McCann, they don't just see Zanzibar investigation, they see target of online hate. It's a redirection of search engine results, a literal burying of the lead. But let's talk about what happened at the Zuri Zanzibar resort before the PR firm got their hands on the story. The hotel staff saw the fight. Not heard it through the wall, saw it. We are talking about a luxury resort where privacy is the product they sell. For staff to intervene, for management to physically relocate a guest to a villa 10 minutes away, that means the disagreement was public, it was loud, and it was intense. According to the accounts that have leaked from the resort, this wasn't an isolated incident. There was a pattern of quarreling frequently across multiple days. This shatters the image Joe tried to project in his funeral day letter. You don't go from quiet moments of reflection and the joys of being in love to being kicked out of your shared villa by hotel security, unless there is a massive, gaping hole in the story you're telling the public. And why was Joe moved? Why was Ashlee left alone in that room? And why, after he was moved, did he end up back at the room with security just in time to find her? The sequence of events is a jigsaw puzzle where the pieces have been sanded down to fit a specific, safer shape. And then there is the ring. The safari proposal on April 3rd was a content creator's dream. It was a high-definition, high-glamour moment designed for the grid. That ring was a symbol of a new chapter. A $395 million lifestyle personified in a stone. Yet, when Ashlee's body was returned to her family in New Jersey, that stone was gone. Her father, Harry Robinson, has been vocal about this. The personal belongings haven't been returned. The ring is presumably in the hands of Tanzanian investigators. If this was a tragic medical accident, as the early whispers tried to suggest, why is the engagement ring being held as evidence? You don't hold a ring as evidence for a natural death. You hold a ring as evidence when there's a struggle. You hold it when you need to check for DNA under the setting. You hold it when the timeline of when it was on her finger versus when it was removed doesn't add up. The family is being told the investigation is ongoing, but they are being given no timeline. They are being told the autopsy is done, but they aren't being shown the results. Imagine being Harry Robinson, driving to the nation's capital, walking into government offices, and begging for someone to tell him how his daughter died because the man who was supposed to marry her won't pick up the phone. The silence of Joe McCann for 26 days wasn't just a lack of words, it was a lack of humanity. While he was allegedly devastated and in shock, he allowed a grieving family to sit in the dark. He allowed them to commission their own independent autopsy because they couldn't trust the narrative coming out of Zanzibar. He allowed them to fly halfway across the world to find answers he could have provided with a single honest conversation. But honesty doesn't protect a hedge fund. Honesty doesn't keep your institutional backers from pulling the plug. So, instead of a conversation, we got a statement. Instead of answers, we got a word salad that talked about her creative talents and her cooking, as if she were a character in a book he was reviewing rather than a woman he had shared a life with. The PR strategy here is also relying heavily on the distance. They know that Tanzania feels like a world away to most people in the US. They are banking on the jurisdictional friction. They know the U.S. Embassy can only do so much. They know the local police aren't obligated to release footage to an American Twitter mob. This disappearance of the story is step 4 of the playbook, and they've been trying to trigger it since day 1. They want the public to get bored. They want the next celebrity scandal to take over the headlines so that Joe can quietly get his passport back, move back to Portland, and restart his life as a survivor of tragedy. But Savannah Britt made sure that didn't happen. By tagging the heavy hitters, by making sure the word strangulation was trending, she locked the story into the public consciousness. She made it impossible for the State Department to ignore. She made it so that when Joe finally did speak, his words felt like a reaction rather than a reflection. We have to look at the power dynamic here. On one side, you have a man with the resources to hire the best reputation managers in the business, a man who moves in circles of extreme wealth and influence. On the other side, you have a family from South Jersey whose biggest weapon is their grief and a community of people who refuse to look away. The PR campaign is an attempt to level that playing field in Joe's favor. It's an attempt to buy time. But time is a double-edged sword. Every day that passes without an arrest, the PR team wins a small victory. But every day that passes without a burial, the family's resolve hardens. Ashlee has not been laid to rest because the truth hasn't been laid bare. The TMZ article even tried to play the racism card, which is a particularly dark turn. By claiming Joe was receiving racist threats, they are attempting to delegitimize the entire movement for justice. They are trying to say that if you want to know why there were marks on her neck, you are somehow aligned with bigots. It's a cynical use of a very real social trauma to protect a man who, until April 9th, was living a life of extreme privilege. It's designed to make you hesitate. It's designed to make you think, well, I don't want to be part of a hate mob, maybe I should just wait and see. And while you're waiting and seeing, the evidence is getting colder, the witnesses are moving on, and the sources close to Joe are writing the next chapter of the fictionalized version of his life. But the hotel staff saw the fight. That is the phrase that keeps coming back, the one that keeps the PR team up at night. Because you can't word salad your way out of an eyewitness account. You can't TMZ your way out of surveillance footage that shows the reality of that night. Savannah Britt didn't just drop that line for the drama. She dropped it as a marker. She's telling Joe and his team that there are people who were there. People who aren't on his payroll. People who saw the mask slip. And as we move into the next phase of this investigation, as those independent autopsy results finally start to trickle in, that weak script Joe's team is writing is going to have to deal with a very inconvenient thing called the truth. The brand is cracked, the fund is gone, and the only thing left is the story of what happened in that villa. And as much as they want to make this about Joe's suffering, this story belongs to Ashlee Robinson. It belongs to the 145,000 people who followed her life and the millions who are now following her death. We are watching a masterclass in how to fail at reputation management, because you can't manage a reputation that is built on a foundation of unanswered questions and 11-hour silences. The performance is faltering, and the audience is only getting louder. The audience is only getting louder, and the reality of the situation is that you can't hide a hedge fund collapse behind a wall of flowers and funeral day tributes forever. This brings us to the final, most desperate phase of the reputation management playbook. If you can't make them love you, and you can't make them pity you, you start making them doubt the person who isn't here to defend herself. Savannah Britt warned us about this, and we need to be very clear-eyed about what comes next. This is the part where the whispers start. This is the part where sources close to Joe stop talking about his grief and start talking about Ashlee's complications. They want to seed doubt. They want to suggest that maybe the situation was more volatile than it looked, or that there were underlying issues that justify the frequent quarreling. It is a classic tactic used by powerful men when they are backed into a corner. Turn the victim into the villain. But that script is failing because the evidence of who Ashlee Robinson was is written in her own digital footprint. She was a woman who was exactly where she needed to be. She was a woman who was celebrating her 31st birthday with the joy of someone who thought she had the world at her feet. You don't go from feeding giraffes and FaceTiming your mother with a smile to a tragic accident involving strangulation and suffocation without a massive, violent intervention of reality. The PR campaign is trying to dilute the pressure by making the story feel complicated. They want the public to throw up their hands and say, Well, we'll never really know what happened in that room. But we do know what happened in the 11 hours after. We know that communication stopped. We know that the man who claimed to be her protector became a ghost to her family. That 11-hour gap is the most damning piece of evidence that no PR firm can spin. In the world of high-stakes crisis management, silence is usually a sign of coordination. It's the time you take to call your lawyers, your publicists, and your mentors before you call the people whose daughter is lying on a hospital gurney. Let's look at the financial ghost in the room, because this is the part the TMZ article conveniently left out. Joe McCann wasn't just a grieving fiancé. He was a man in the middle of a massive professional freefall. When your fund drops 78%, when the venture capitalists who once treated you like a god start looking for the exit, you are desperate for a win. You are desperate to maintain the brand. If the Zanzibar tragedy is framed as anything other than a heartbreaking accident, Joe's career isn't just over. It becomes a legal liability for everyone who ever gave him a dollar. Savannah Britt hit the nail on the head when she said he cares about what his crypto money guys think. The PR campaign is an advertisement for his investors. It's a signal to the institutional money that says, I'm still the victim here, I'm still the good guy, you can still trust me with your millions. It's a move designed to protect the asymmetric brand at the expense of the truth. But the truth has a way of leaking out of even the most expensive villas. The fight witnessed by hotel staff is the anchor that keeps this story from floating away into the realm of PR fantasy. The police accounts from Tanzania are clear. This wasn't a one-time thing. The conflict was sustained. It was loud enough to move a grown man 10 minutes away from his own shared accommodation. Why was he moved? Because the resort, which caters to the ultra-wealthy and the ultra-private, couldn't ignore the disruption. And yet, 48 hours after her funeral, Joe's narrative tried to claim that they were in a state of bliss. The gaslighting isn't just aimed at the family. It's aimed at the witnesses. It's an attempt to tell the hotel staff that what they saw wasn't a fight, but a passionate misunderstanding. But hotel staff don't relocate guests for misunderstandings. They relocate them for safety. We also have to talk about the physical evidence that is still sitting in Tanzania. The engagement ring, the personal belongings, the surveillance footage. These are not just items. They are the keys to the room where Ashlee spent her final moments. Why hasn't the hotel released the footage? Why has Joe's location remained a mystery while he is officially a witness? In a standard investigation, a witness with a confiscated passport usually makes a statement and waits. In a PR-managed investigation, a witness stays silent, lets his sources speak to TMZ, and waits for the public interest to die down. They are betting on the slow disappearance. They are betting that by the time the independent autopsy results are fully analyzed, you will have moved on to the next viral story. They are betting that the $63,000 raised by the community won't be enough to fight the millions behind the hedge fund. But they forgot one thing. Harry Robinson. They forgot about a father who isn't afraid of a crypto millionaire. They forgot about a mother who knows her daughter's voice better than any publicist knows a word salad. When Harry Robinson went to Washington, D.C., he wasn't just looking for a meeting. He was looking for leverage. He knows that the only way to get answers from a jurisdiction halfway across the globe is to make it a diplomatic issue. He made sure that the U.S. Embassy had to make contact. He made sure that the word strangulation couldn't be buried in a Tanzanian file cabinet. The PR campaign is a response to that pressure. It is a sign that the pressure is working. If Joe McCann didn't feel the walls closing in, he wouldn't have broken 26 days of silence on the day of the funeral. The most disgusting part of this entire performance is the timing. To post that letter while the family was at the Second Baptist Church is a level of psychological warfare that is hard to wrap your head around. It was designed to hijack the news cycle. When people searched for Ashlee Robinson funeral, he wanted them to find Joe McCann's heartbreak. It was an attempt to attach his narrative to their grief, to leech off the emotional energy of a community that was saying goodbye. It was a calculated, cold-blooded communication strategy, and the TMZ article that followed was the second punch in that 1-2 combo. Sources close to Joe told us he's receiving threats. Sources close to Joe told us he's a victim. Not one person was willing to put their name to those claims. Not one friend. Not one partner. Just a faceless, nameless entity that exists to protect a man who won't answer why he waited 11 hours to call his fiancée's parents. Savannah Britt was right. Keep writing your weak script, Joe. Because every time you release a statement that doesn't answer the question of the missing ring, you're adding evidence to the court of public opinion. Every time you hide behind a PR firm instead of talking to the family you claim to love, you're telling us exactly who you are. This channel is not going to stop. We are going to keep asking about the Zuri Zanzibar surveillance footage. We are going to keep asking why the hospital report mentioned suffocation. We are going to keep asking why a visionary, who can track every penny in a crypto wallet, can't seem to account for the final hours of the woman he was supposed to marry. The story of Ashlee Robinson isn't just a story about a tragedy in a luxury resort. It's a story about the power of a community to demand the truth when the machine tries to sell them a lie. It's about a family that refuses to be silenced by word salad and sources close to Joe. We are the only leverage they have. As we wait for the final autopsy reports, as we wait for the Tanzanian authorities to decide if that confiscated passport becomes a permanent status, we need to stay loud. Do not let the PR campaign work. Do not let them turn the victim into a footnote in a hedge fund manager's comeback story. Ashlee Robinson was a beacon of light. She was a woman who lived her life out loud, with confidence and directness. She deserves a narrative that matches her spirit, not a narrative that serves her fiancé's bank account. The PR script is weak, the acting is worse, and the audience knows exactly how this movie ends. The performance is over, Joe. We see you. We see the fight. We see the 11 hours. And we are not going anywhere until the truth is as loud as the silence you kept for 26 days. Share this video for the family. Share it for the truth. Share it for Ashlee. Because the only thing stronger than a PR machine is a community that refuses to forget. We are just getting started. What do you think the next move in the playbook will be? Do you think the surveillance footage will ever see the light of day? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to say her name. Ashlee Robinson. Let the sources close to Joe know that we aren't buying what they're selling. We are looking for justice, and we won't stop until we find it. Subscribe to stay updated as the independent results come in. This is about more than celebrity news. This is about the truth. I'll see you in the next one. The curtains are closing on this chapter of the performance, but the real investigation is only just heating up. What we are witnessing isn't just a tragic loss. It is a clinical study in how wealth and influence attempt to rewrite reality in real time. But Joe McCann and his team of anonymous sources forgot one thing, They forgot that a community armed with the truth is more powerful than any high-priced publicist or strategically placed TMZ headline. They want you to get bored. They want you to look away. They want the silence to win. Don't give them that satisfaction. Every share, every comment, and every person who hears Ashlee's name is another crack in that carefully constructed PR wall. Are you going to believe the word salad? Or are you going to believe the facts standing right in front of you? Drop a comment below and say her name. Ashlee Robinson. Tell me what you see in the timing of that letter. If you're ready to hold the powerful accountable and stay with this story until the final autopsy results land, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We aren't going anywhere. And we aren't letting this story disappear. For Ashlee, for the truth and for justice, stay tuned. I will see you in the next one.